It was another typical night for me, cruising through the dimly lit streets of the city with my phone propped up on the dashboard. I've been doing food delivery part-time for over a year now, mostly to make ends meet. My main job at the warehouse doesn't pay enough, so this gig is how I maximize my earnings. It's not glamorous, but it works if you're smart about it. The key to making decent money in this line of work isn't just speed or knowing shortcuts, it's consistency. You have to stay efficient, even during downtime. And there's always downtime, those long stretches between orders when you're sitting in your car, waiting for that next ping from the app. Some drivers scroll through social media or take naps, but I use those moments to plan ahead. I keep an eye on peak hours in busy areas, positioning myself near restaurants where big orders tend to come in. A $20 tip can change your whole night if you play your cards right. That evening started like any other. The weather was cold, the kind that bites at your fingers as soon as you step out of the car. I had already delivered 3 meals by 8 p.m. Nothing exciting, just the usual mix of late-night cravings: burgers, pizza, Chinese takeout. After dropping off a bag of greasy fries to a college kid who barely looked up from his laptop, I parked near a cluster of popular restaurants downtown. This spot was strategic. It was close enough to several high-demand zones without being too far from the highway. If an order came in, I could grab it fast and get moving before someone else snagged it. As I waited, I scrolled through the app, checking which restaurants were backed up with orders. There wasn't much activity yet, so I leaned back in my seat and sipped from a thermos of coffee I'd brought along. The quiet hum of the engine mixed with the faint buzz of streetlights outside. Nights like these felt almost peaceful. Then my phone buzzed, a new order popped up. Finally, I glanced at the details. A sushi place only 2 blocks away. Perfect. Quick pickup, decent distance to the drop-off location, easy money. I pulled out of my parking spot and headed toward the restaurant. That's when things started to feel off. When I arrived at the sushi restaurant, the staff handed me the insulated bag, and I double-checked the address on the ticket. It was for a residential area on the outskirts of town, an odd choice for a sushi order. The GPS led me down narrower and darker roads, the kind lined with trees whose branches clawed at the sky. Streetlights grew sparse, and my headlights cut sharp beams into the blackness. By the time I reached the address, my hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The house was dark, its windows blank and lifeless. No cars in the driveway, no signs of anyone waiting for their dinner. I hesitated before getting out of the car, scanning the shadows for any movement. Everything felt wrong. Too quiet, too isolated. So I grabbed the insulated bag and walked up to the front door, my footsteps crunching loudly against the gravel path. Before I could knock, the porch light flickered on. A man emerged from the shadows inside the house. They didn't look like they were expecting sushi. He stepped closer to the door, and I froze. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his face partially obscured by the dim light. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me, his eyes sharp and unreadable. My pulse thundered in my ears as I held out the insulated bag like some kind of pathetic peace offering. Sushi delivery. I managed to choke out, my voice trembling despite my best effort to sound calm. He tilted his head slightly, studying me as if I were an intruder rather than someone bringing him food. Then he spoke, his tone low. "You're not supposed to be here." My stomach dropped. What did that mean? Not supposed to be here? Was this the wrong address? Had I made a mistake? But the GPS had led me straight to this house. It matched the one on the ticket. Before I could respond, the man took a step forward, pushing the door open wider. Behind him, the house was pitch black, the kind of darkness that swallows sound and light whole. "I think there's been a mix-up," I said quickly, backing away toward my car. "I'll check the order again." "No need," he interrupted, his voice colder now. "Come inside." It wasn't a request, it was a command, delivered with a weight that sent chills down my spine. My instincts roared at me to run, but my legs felt rooted to the spot. This wasn't how deliveries were supposed to go. This wasn't normal. "I'm good, really," I stammered, clutching the bag tighter. "I'll just leave it here." Before I could finish, another figure appeared behind him, another man, equally unsettling. He carried something in his hand, and when he raised it, I saw the glint of metal. A knife. my breath hitched, and all rational thought fled my mind. Without thinking, I turned and bolted for my car, fumbling with the keys as I heard them shouting after me. "Hey, get back here!" I didn't look back. I unlocked the car, threw myself inside, and slammed the door shut just as they reached the driveway. The engine roared to life, and I peeled out of there faster than I'd ever driven before, gravel spraying behind me. My hands shook so badly I could barely steer, but adrenaline kept me moving. I didn't stop until I was miles away, parked under a bright streetlight in a crowded gas station lot. For a long time, I sat there, trying to catch my breath and make sense of what had just happened. Who were those people? Why had they acted like I wasn't supposed to deliver their food? And why did they want me to go inside? Later, when I finally mustered the courage to call customer support, they couldn't or wouldn't explain much. They confirmed the order was legitimate, but refused to give me any details about the customers. All they said was, sometimes addresses get flagged for safety reasons. Flagged? What did that even mean? Was this a regular thing? Did other drivers know about it? That night haunted me for weeks. I replayed every moment in my head, wondering what would have happened if I'd stayed, if I hadn't listened to my gut. Eventually, I stopped taking late-night orders altogether. The extra money wasn't worth the risk, not after what I'd seen. Now, whenever I hear stories about missing delivery drivers or unsolved disappearances, I can't help but wonder, how many of them walked into a situation like mine? How many ended up somewhere far worse? I worked as a grocery delivery driver for a small chain called Fresh Picks during the pandemic. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid decently, and I liked being outdoors instead of stuck in an office all day. Most deliveries were straightforward: drop off the bags, snap a photo, and move on to the next stop. But every now and then, I'd meet someone who made the job feel less transactional and more personal. One of those people was Margaret. Margaret lived in a cozy little house on the edge of town, tucked away at the end of a tree-lined street. She was in her late 70s, with silver hair always neatly styled and glasses perched on the tip of her nose. Every Wednesday morning, she'd place the same order: fresh produce, whole grain bread, almond milk, and a few other staples. Her deliveries came on Friday afternoons, and over time, we fell into a comfortable routine. At first, Margaret didn't come outside when I arrived. Instead, I'd catch her peeking through the curtains, watching me unload her groceries. I'd wave, take my picture, and head back to my van. Eventually, though, she started coming out to greet me. After a while, she asked if I'd mind carrying the groceries inside. "My back's not what it used to be," she said with a shy smile. Of course, I agreed. Helping her felt good, especially since she tipped generously. As the months went by, we got to know each other better. On Fridays, I'd bring her groceries into the kitchen, set them on the counter, and chat for a few minutes while she unpacked. She told me stories about growing up in Maine, raising her kids, and teaching elementary school before retiring. She spoke fondly of her family, though they lived far away now. Her husband had passed years ago, and she rarely saw her children except during holidays. Still, she seemed content, surrounded by her books, plants, and knickknacks. One Friday, everything changed. It started like any other delivery. I loaded her bags into the van and headed to her house, expecting the usual friendly exchange. But when I pulled into her driveway, something felt off. The front door was wide open, which wasn't normal. Margaret usually waited for me on the porch or opened the door as soon as I arrived. This time, there was no sign of her. Even stranger, all the blinds were drawn tight. Margaret loved natural light. She always kept her curtains open to let it stream in for her plants. I parked the van and walked up to the door, calling out her name. No response. I rang the doorbell and knocked several times, waiting longer than usual between each attempt. Still nothing. My stomach tightened. Something wasn't right. Part of me wanted to turn around, leave the groceries on the porch, and call it a day. That's what company policy dictated. If no one answers, don't enter the home. But this wasn't just another customer. This was Margaret. If something had happened to her, I needed to know. Taking a deep breath, I stepped inside. The air felt heavy, almost suffocating. Everything was eerily silent. I called out again, louder, but still no answer. Moving cautiously, I carried the groceries to the kitchen and set them on the counter. As I turned to leave, I heard it, a faint sound coming from upstairs. It sounded like footsteps, slow and careful, as if someone were pacing. "Margaret?" I called, my voice trembling slightly. Silence followed. Then, the shuffling resumed, almost hesitant. My heart raced. Was she hurt? Or worse, was someone else in the house? I stood frozen for a moment, torn between investigating further and getting the hell out of there. Logic told me to leave, to call the police and report a potential break-in, but concern for Margaret kept me rooted to the spot. After a minute or two, I decided to head back outside. Whatever was happening upstairs, I didn't want to stick around to find out. As I reached the front door, I glanced toward the second-story windows. One of the curtains twitched ever so slightly, as if someone had moved it aside to look out. My blood ran cold. Who was up there? Back in my van, I sat for a while, staring at the house. Should I call the cops? What would I even say? I think something's wrong at my elderly customer's house. They'd probably laugh me off. Maybe Margaret was fine. Maybe she'd gone to visit a neighbor or run errands. But deep down, I knew something wasn't adding up. To test my theory, I drove around the block and circled back, parking farther down the street where I could still see her house. A few minutes later, the curtain on the second floor shifted again. This time, I caught a glimpse of someone standing there. A man. He looked directly at my van, then quickly closed the curtain. Who was he? Margaret never mentioned having visitors, let alone male ones. Her son lived in another state, and her daughters visited only occasionally. Could it have been a relative, a friend, or was it someone else entirely? I didn't stick around to find out. Work was piling up, and I couldn't afford to lose my job over a hunch. Reluctantly, I drove away, promising myself I'd check on her again soon. The following Wednesday, I noticed something strange. Margaret hadn't placed her usual order. For nearly a year, she'd been as consistent as clockwork, but now her name was missing from the list. I tried not to panic. Maybe she was traveling or staying with family. People took breaks sometimes, right? But by Friday, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. After finishing my route, I drove past her house. Parked in the driveway was a police car. My stomach sank. When I got home, I did some digging online. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Margaret had been reported missing 3 days earlier. According to the report, she was last seen alive on Tuesday, the day after I delivered her groceries. The timeline matched perfectly. Someone had been in her house that Friday, and whoever it was had known enough to hide. The next morning, I went to the police station and told them everything. The open door, the noises upstairs, the mysterious man at the window. They listened intently, asking questions and jotting down notes. While they appreciated the information, they warned me not to get involved further. These cases, they said, often went unsolved. 3 years have passed since that day, and Margaret's disappearance remains a mystery. No arrests were made, no bodies found. Sometimes late at night, I wonder if I could have done more, if I should have pushed harder to investigate when I had the chance. Other times, I remind myself that I was just doing my job, delivering groceries to strangers and hoping for the best. I've been working delivery gigs for a while now, mostly on weekends to bring in some extra cash. It started as a way to cover gas expenses when I was in college, but it turned into something I kept doing even after graduation because, well, money is always tight. I use both DoorDash and Uber Eats at the same time. My buddy taught me how to double up on apps, so there's no downtime driving around waiting for orders. You get more work done that way, though it does mean constantly jumping from one car to another or managing multiple pickups. One Sunday night, I was cruising through my usual routes, racing between restaurants and drop-off spots. The hours had flown by, and I was feeling pretty good about the amount of deliveries I'd knocked out already. Then came an order that seemed too good to be true. A small food order from a nearby restaurant, but the destination was far away. Normally, those kinds of trips aren't worth it. They eat up gas and time without much pay. But this one promised a big tip, like huge, enough to make the long drive worthwhile. So I accepted it, picked up the bag of food, checked the address, and set off on what would turn out to be the most terrifying 30 minutes of my life. The first half of the trip went smoothly. I stayed focused on the road, keeping an eye on traffic and making sure I didn't miss any turns. About halfway there, my phone rang. It was the app calling, likely the customer. I answered, expecting the standard, "Where are you?" question. "Hey, is this my Uber Eats driver?" a man asked. His voice sounded calm, almost apologetic. "Yeah, it's me," I replied. "Oh, thank God," he said quickly. "Listen, I messed up. I ordered from my friend's account and I forgot to change the address. My house is actually just around the block from his place. Can you follow these directions once you reach the original address?" He rattled off a few quick instructions. Turn left here, go straight until the stop sign, then take another left onto a side street. He assured me he'd be waiting outside for me. When I asked for the exact address just in case, he hesitated before saying, "Don't worry, you'll see me right away." That struck me as odd. Why wouldn't he just give me the address? But I shrugged it off. People make mistakes all the time, especially with delivery apps. Besides, I was already halfway there, and turning back now would cost me the tip, the whole reason I took the order in the first place. When I finally reached the friend's house, I followed the directions the guy had given me. The neighborhood felt eerily quiet, with only a handful of dim streetlights casting faint shadows across the empty roads. After the second turn, I found myself on a narrow dead-end street lined with old houses. A no-outlet sign loomed ahead, confirming I was heading toward the end of the road. I pulled over near the last house, figuring this must be where the guy lived. Before calling him, I glanced around the area. Something about the stillness made my skin crawl. No cars passed by. It was completely deserted. Just as I clicked into my recent calls to dial the number, a sharp knock on my driver's side window startled me. Embarrassed by how visibly jumpy I was, I rolled down the window slightly, ready to greet the customer. But when I looked up, I froze. The man standing there wore a blank expression, no smile, no frown, nothing. His eyes were cold and unreadable. My stomach dropped. Without thinking, I let go of the window button and hit the lock switch instead. Adrenaline surged through me as I realized something wasn't right. And then, in one swift motion, the man shoved a gun through the partially open window, pressing the barrel directly against my temple. "Don't move," he barked, his voice low and menacing. Time slowed to a crawl. My heart pounded in my chest as I stared at the weapon inches from my face. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Several figures emerging from the shadows, sprinting toward my car. They surrounded the vehicle, yanking on door handles and shouting commands at each other. Their voices blended together in a chaotic blur, but one thing was clear: they weren't here to chat. In that moment, I couldn't think straight. My mind went blank, overwhelmed by fear and disbelief. How had this happened? Wasn't I just delivering dinner? What did they want from me? And then, for reasons I can't fully explain, instinct kicked in. While the man with the gun momentarily shifted his gaze, maybe distracted by his accomplices, I floored the accelerator. The tires screeched as the car lurched forward, nearly catching the guy's arm in the process. He yanked the gun back just in time, stumbling backward. Reaching the end of the cul-de-sac, I slammed on the brakes, spun the wheel, and performed a frantic three-point turn. By the time I faced the opposite direction, the group had vanished. Not a single person remained on the street. They disappeared into thin air, leaving behind only silence. Shaking uncontrollably, I sped out of the neighborhood as fast as I could, gripping the steering wheel like my life depended on it. Once I was safely away, I pulled over and dialed 911. My hands trembled so badly I could barely hold the phone steady. I explained everything: the suspicious call, the wrong address, the armed men, and begged them to send officers immediately. By the time police arrived at the scene, whoever had been there was long gone. Despite searching the area and reviewing security footage, they found no evidence linking anyone to the incident. It was as if the entire thing had never happened. To this day, I don't know who those people were or why they targeted me. Maybe it was random, maybe not. Either way, it changed how I approach every delivery job. Confidence doesn't protect you, not when someone has a weapon pointed at your head. Size doesn't matter, strength doesn't matter. In situations like that, you're vulnerable no matter who you are. Since that night, I've become hyper-aware of my surroundings. If an order seems sketchy, if the address looks remote, If the customer gives vague directions, if anything feels off, I cancel it. No amount of money is worth risking your safety.